Hey folks, Charlie in Westeros here, back again with my review and thoughts for Game of Thrones Season 7 Episode 2 entitled Stormborn. And what a throwback title to Daenerys' birth, as well as the birth of Euron Greyjoy's epicness to the audience during the stormy battle against his niece's fleet. But we'll be getting into that soon. As always, if you have not seen this episode of GOT, then move away right now because this video does contain spoilers from this very episode. And with all that out of the way, let's jump right into the events with Sam at Old Town. Yet again this episode, the scenes with Sam were full of Game of Thrones lore to satisfy my inner Westeros history nerd. For those of you who watch my discussion videos with the Small Council on James of Thrones channel, I knew Sam had to be the one to cure Jorah's grayscale. What surprised me more, however, was that some semblance of a cure already existed, as I thought for sure Sam would be the one to discover said cure. I also don't think I need to point out the fact that the Old Town scenes seem to be the ones with the most disgusting visuals this season by far. The peeling of the pus-filled grayscales off of Jorah reminded me so much of those pimple popping videos on YouTube that you just want to look away from but can't. I was hoping Sam curing Jorah would be a little bit more epic than the gross nature of what it was. Like, I don't know, maybe involving obsidian or dragon glass potentially, especially given Sam's exchange with the Maester about Shireen being saved from dying of her grayscale, all the while living on Dragonstone, where there is a mountain full of the material. But so be it. It could also be that the paste Sam was applying is in fact related to dragon glass in some way, but I guess we'll see. Or perhaps it could also be similar to the marks Quaithe applied to the man traveling to Valyria in Karth way back in season 2. I really do wish we could see that character again now that I think on it. Anyway, I digress. On the other side of Westeros, Cersei's scenes were very interesting as always. They were especially intriguing to me considering that she was appealing to the nobles of Westeros by playing into their fears of a foreign army, and one led by a woman who executed a bunch of nobles in Slaver's Bay at that. How very Trump of you, Cersei. This was also a scene that was full of Game of Thrones historical tidbits, including the fact that the Tarleys are sworn to House Tyrell, currently under Olenna's authority. What perhaps surprised me the most, however, was that Jaime was able to potentially sway Randyll Tarley to his cause by playing on his fears, all the while promising him the title of Warden of the South. That said, I am happy they acknowledge the fact that Daenerys' dragons are a very real threat, and this is where I'm happy that Qyburn, in fact, indirectly played a little tribute to a book canon event with his invention that could allegedly kill dragons. In the World of Ice and Fire book, we find out that the dragon of one of Aegon the Conqueror's sister wives was actually killed by a similar ballista-like weapon in Dorne, similar to the one invented by Qyburn. While I don't think they'll include that fact in the show, I do appreciate that it's acknowledged as being a real threat to Dany's dragons, and I do wonder if it'll be successfully used against one of her own beasts. Speaking of beasts, Arya's scenes were probably the most bittersweet this episode because we finally get to see Hot Pie and Nymeria back after so long. Let's first start off with Hot Pie. There really isn't much to say in this case, but I will say that I am so glad they showed us Arya learning of her half-brother Jon taking back Winterfell. This scene reaffirmed that despite her changed and wild nature, she is still a Stark at heart and wants nothing else but being reunited with her family. Also, the line Hot Pie delivers to her that he's a survivor and won't get killed does make me a little worried for him, because it's always the characters that gloat about surviving that end up being killed off. However, in this case, I think it's more of an indication that his story in Game of Thrones is basically over with and that he probably will survive the series when all is said and done. Hopefully, anyway. Now, moving on to the important part of Arya's scenes, her reunion with Nymeria. This scene was so intense, and I am so happy they included the fact that Nymeria was leading a huge pack of wolves, not something I expected from the TV show, honestly. Despite that, I am still sad that the direwolf chose to leave her former master. Granted, I think it's a clear sign that just like Arya, Nymeria cannot be tamed and is meant to travel on her own journey. This was also apparently a throwback reference to a scene between Arya and Ned in season 1, but I won't delve into that since so many news articles are discussing it. I'll link one right below. With all that said, I am convinced Nymeria and her wolves will also make a comeback before the end of the series. I could see this epic setup where Arya is surrounded on all sides by White Walkers. Then Nymeria just shows up to save her old master, sacrificing herself in the process. But all that for another season, certainly. Moving on to the other Starks, Jon and Sansa's scenes. The first scene gave me real chills because of the emphasis that every time a Stark has gone south to deal with the rulers there, something bad has happened to them. Sansa's concern for Jon totally reminded me of Catelyn Stark, actually, back when Cat was trying to convince Ned not to travel south with Robert. To the point that it does make me a little bit worried for Jon, actually. In fact, the scene was full of throwback references, including the lovely scene of Jon choking Littlefinger in the crypts of Winterfell as a reminder of that time Ned did the exact same thing to him in King's Landing. I don't know why, but despite Littlefinger's glee at Sansa ruling the North in Jon Snow's absence, along with his creepy love for her, I can't help but feel like that character looks so much more pathetic than he did earlier in the series. His constantly getting denied doesn't make him seem like much of a power player anymore in the series, and so I'm hoping he does something epic to at least remind us as to why he's someone we should be careful of. Now, one interaction which stood in stark contrast to Littlefinger's interaction with Jon Snow is that of Varys with Daenerys, where Littlefinger was sort of poking the wolf and ended up getting bitten. Varys was the one being snapped at by the dragon that is Daenerys from the get-go, but ended up coming out of the interaction defending himself very well and even looked better in the long run. I think it also reaffirms the very different motivations between Varys and Littlefinger, where Mr. Finger is in it for his own desires. Varys truly appears to have the good of the masses and the realm at heart, or at least so he would have us think anyway. Another shocking part of the scene at Dragonstone was the arrival of Melisandre. I thought for sure she had something much more significant planned, but it seems as though she simply went to Dragonstone to help forge an alliance between Jon and Daenerys in fighting the White Walkers. More importantly, her entire aura appears to have changed, actually. Instead of approaching the threat of the White Walkers with absolute zeal and belief in her visions, she kept things much vaguer, simply trusting that both Jon and Daenerys have a role to play in the upcoming wars, even saying that they don't have to necessarily believe in the Red God to fight for him. Yet another point that seems to stand in stark contrast to her prior willingness in burning those non-believers when she served Stannis. Last but not least, I personally love that Melisandre emphasized how the prince that was promised prophecy doesn't necessarily need to refer to a man, but could also be a woman. This certainly does create the potential that Dany could be just as important, if not more so, than Jon Snow, but of course that is something that remains to be seen. Olenna's advice to Daenerys was equally poignant. I was quite surprised that the Queen of Thorns told Daenerys to simply be a dragon. At one time, it would seem more likely that Olenna would encourage women, namely her granddaughter, to use more tactful or clever approaches. But now she seems to see the fact that Daenerys is indeed a conqueror like her ancestor, and should not so much act in an overly calculated way. At least that's what I got from it. Despite having advisors with seemingly foolproof plans to attack King's Landing, something does in my mind have to go wrong, and naturally it absolutely did this episode. But before addressing the battle in the Narrow Sea, I must say that the Melisandre Greyworm sex scene was a bit unexpected and just a little fillery. But I suppose it was essential for something to happen between these two characters at some point before Greyworm departs to attack Casterly Rock. It does also make me worried that Greyworm could be offed potentially during this fighting as well, but I guess we'll see. Alrighty, the battle at the Narrow Sea. Not much to say except damn, Euron can fight. There were some points where I was almost convinced he was dealt some mortal blow, yet escaped, which convinces me that in addition to being younger than he should be in appearance, there's something magical at play with this character, and I can't wait to find out. Two Sand Snakes are down, with Bad Pussy Sand Snake and Mama Ilaria in some serious trouble as his hostages and potential proposal gifts to Cersei. And alas, last but not least, Reek has also made a comeback. At the same time, I don't really know what he could have done at that moment to save his sister, even if he had remained in his Theon persona. Despite this, I truly do hope he redeems himself yet again by the end of the series, because I'm a little bit tired of Theon relapsing constantly since season 3 or 4 into that pathetic character that he's kind of become. Anyway, I made this video longer than I intended to. Overall, this episode was pretty great, and I'm so happy we are finally getting some warfare. I'd probably give this episode an 8.5 out of 10 by Game of Thrones standards, of course, and I just can't wait to see what comes next. As always, thank you all so much for watching. Please let me know what you think in the comment sections below, and I will see you all next time.